Migration is not new. It is from every time. The causes are different, and they can be socio-economic, conflicts or persecution, and human rights violations. And it results in voluntary migration and forced migration, labor migration and refugees. In addition, we will see the coming years increasingly displacement because of the climate. And of course, at present already, we see people who are trafficked. The result is that people move from their homes and end up elsewhere. And it leads many times to individual sufferings. When people are persecuted by expressing their view, or when their lives are at risk, they will flee. Some will come to Europe, others will end up in the USA. However, the majority remains in the region of origin. And the same applies to labor migration. The overall majority of migrants are living in southern countries. In general, the public overestimates the numbers involved in migration. In Europe, only 20% of the world's population of migrants live, and that are about 50 million people. Migration takes place, mainly place outside Europe and outside the USA. The perception of the public is just the opposite. And that goes together with the negative labeling of asylum seekers and refugees with xenophobia and racism. And that increases fear and intolerance. The coming generation will be confronted increasingly with migration here in the USA. Societies that accept fewer children have two choices: or to invite migrants or to export economy. Baby boomers begin turning into seniors, and replacing them will rely in large part on foreign-born youth. In addition, we will see increasingly more disasters with displacement as a result. Climate change is part of it. And this 21st century will be even more dominated by migration than last century. It requires that adequate migration policies will be developed, which will go together with adequate legislation. We go to labor migration. At present, people are looking for employment. And the result is that at present around 38 million immigrants are living in the USA. But it started early, with waves of migration, with waves of migrations. The Dutch in New Amsterdam, not far from here, followed by the British, the Germans, the Irish, the Italians. Do not forget the French Canadians, 900,000 who arrived here, nor the Chinese, East European, the Jewish population. Ellis Island was well known, and at the high point, in 30 years' time, 3 million people passed there. And the Asians arrived in Angel Island in the San Francisco Bay. And each group contributed to history. As a Dutch person, I have to say this, your currency, the dollar, got its name from the Dutch dollar. Dollar, dollar. There are far more examples, but I will not tire you with them. But each group brings in its own culture, and all kinds of things are then happening. It is also true that each group had to face its own sentiments of discrimination. In 1882, the Chinese were hated enough to be banned from immigrating. And that was the beginning of the Chinese Exclusion Act. In the 1880s, labor unions opposed unrestricted immigration from Europe for, as they said at that time, moral, cultural, and racial reasons. And anti-Catholicism was widespread in the 1920s. It was linked to these dirty Italians who were a threat to society. I don't want to go into the Irish because perhaps then I will get too many rejections. But of course, at this moment, we see the same fear for people who are different. It is not this is history, but of course we see the same, how do we treat nowadays Latinos? And of course they bring their own culture and sometimes even the language, and a lot of emotions are coming up there, but later perhaps we can talk about it. Indeed, the USA has been shaped by the efforts of migrants, in former days, but also nowadays. Many immigrants arrive to the USA with economic goals, expectations, and their contribution. Migrants have become essential for the US economy, and they make up a large part of the national workforce. The last 60, 70 years, the Latinos arrived. One of the latest groups of arrival are Africans. They are at present a minority, about 4% of the 39 million migrants. From 1980 to 2009, the African-born population in the United States grew from just under 200,000 to almost 1.5 million. Top countries of origin for the African-born are Nigeria, Ethiopia, Egypt, Ghana, and Kenya. There are differences with other foreign-born. African immigrants, they know more than other groups the English language. They have a higher educational level. They are more likely to be lower in age for working, and they participate in the labor force. But it is also true that in average, that their annual income lies below the poverty line. These figures indicate that society is changing. Employment of foreign-born persons is one of the highest in the last 100 years. And challenges are visible all over, from a rapid increase of Spanish spoken in churches, the pastoral work depending increasingly on foreign priests, till a concentration of ethnic restaurants in suburbs, or suburbs consisting of almost only one ethnic minority. Like a few miles from here, I think people from Korea. I don't know how the place is called, but by bus we were passing there. These are external signs of a changing society. However, it seems that these changes don't reflect an increased acceptance of the otherness, a willingness to a change, a mutual change. The new person is changing, but the people in society also have to change. It is a process at two sides. And it seems that at present there is still quite some resentment against that. The influence of migration on sending countries is considerable. It is visible. You can go around and you see where people are building, because they send money home to combat poverty. It is used for housing, nutrition, healthcare, education, and also to buy consumer goods. And it boosts the local economy. The amount of remittances, the money sent home, is twice the amount of the official development assistance. It is huge. And some economists are stating that if a country is willing to assist another country, they should take in migrants from that country, because these people will send them sufficient money home. It is a very original view. I don't know whether it is truly true, but it struck me. It was a study which was published about 2 weeks ago.